Dear listeners, we are so excited to be back with Season 3 of the Ampersand Manifesto. We're starting the season off with an interview that I was so delighted to be able to do. The timing was just right. I caught Rich Lyons a couple weeks after he was named as UC Berkeley's next chancellor, and a couple months before he officially started in his new role. Listen ahead for Rich talking about his life in academia, starting his days with music, and sharing some things you might not know about him.
There are a lot of smart people who don't have as a first thought, there's got to be a better way to do this. So this is not one-to-one with intelligence. It's a different mindset. It's a different way of life. I love working with and being around people who actually have that thought pretty naturally. I'll bet there's a better way to do this. I love that kind of person.
I am so excited to be speaking with Rich Lyons, education leader and musician. Rich was recently appointed by the UC Regents to be Berkeley's next chancellor starting July 1st. At Cal, he has served as the Chief Innovation and Entrepreneurship Officer, and he was previously the Dean of the Haas School of Business, where he established the school's 4 defining principles and oversaw the development of the Connie and Kevin Chou Hall. He returned to Haas as faculty in 2018, where he currently holds the William and Janet Cronk Chair in Innovative Leadership. Rich starts his mornings playing guitar and has performed as a musician in numerous business school and campus-wide celebrations, bringing smiles to students' faces and joy to the community. Rich, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jessica.
We are recording this interview in the end of April, and you were just named as UC Berkeley's next chancellor just a few weeks ago. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. No, super exciting, as you can imagine.
As you look ahead to the next few months, what are you sharing with folks about your plans as chancellor?
At the mission level, if we thought about kind of first principles, mission and values, not where everybody starts, but I'll start there, because if you look at the university's mission, the University of California, the 10-campus system mission, you can find it on the website, naturally. It's 70 words long. I just looked at it. But the core, the kernel, the 3 words that are at the center of it, the why, is long-term, hyphenated, one word, long-term societal benefit. So impact. At the end of the day, how do we ensure that Berkeley, as one of society's most valuable assets at the end of the day, how do we make sure that Berkeley's having as much impact as it can in the education that it does, in the research that it does, in the service to the public that it does? That sounds like an obvious question, but you can read those 70 words and not see that kernel quite so clearly. And, impact, getting our research into the world, is mission advancing. If somebody said, all this, innovation and entrepreneurship, it's not really what a public research university should be doing. It's like, I disagree. It's lined up with our mission.
Absolutely. And thanks for that kernel. We can all go read it. One key skill in leadership, as well as in music, is listening. Listening well, active listening to the right things at the right time. How do you think music has helped you develop your listening skills?
Thanks for that question. For a long time, I couldn't call myself a musician, right? I think it was a pastime. It's a hobby. I've been doing it a long time now. Some might listen to me and think, wow, you should really be better than that after that long. But I love it, and I do it every day, as you say. And now, I kind of welcome opportunities to sort of break the ice with people. It's just break it out and play a Rolling Stones tune and let people connect to you and you to them. And, so anyways, that's kind of what I do. But I think the listening point, which is really the center of your question, I remember I got some great feedback. You get lots of great feedback from other musicians. And one of them said, listen to yourself play, like record yourself and play, but also while you're playing in real time, listen. I got to hear Willie Nelson play at the Greek Theater just a couple days ago. He played on Wednesday, right? We're doing this on Friday. So this is very recent. And I was really watching him. He's 90. The guy is going to be 91 like in 2 days. Anyways, but when you're watching him play his lovely guitar, and if he's not singing, he is riffing. He's playing. But when he's singing, his guitar is he's not banging on his guitar and riffing, right? It's like, oh, leave room for the words because they matter. And when the words aren't there, you play that guitar. And that's kind of a small point, but you don't get that until you really start listening.
I love that. One of my fondest memories from my time as a Haas MBA student was our annual talent show. So this is circa 2009 or 2010. And I remember you came and you closed out the night on your guitar to a standing ovation, of course. What do you feel in these moments when you're performing music in front of people?
Thanks. Early on in my life, I got to give a graduation speech in high school. And I didn't know that I would like that or that I would be good at it. I'm not saying I was particularly good, but I could tell I liked it. And, what am I then? I'm like 18 or whatever. And I just felt so energized. I spent a lot of time actually preparing that talk. But that was the first time I'd sort of gave a talk. And I just felt so energized, right? It was like, where are you finding your best energy in life? This is one of the signals early on in your life. It's like, there's something here. Like, please listen. So I love the teaching part of my career, right? Lots of academics become academics because they really want to focus on research. And that's great. And you have to do research to be at Berkeley. There's no question about it. But the teaching part I loved it. Okay. So, the music, performing music and how I feel when I play music, it's kind of, for me, in the same category. It's like, if I'm into it, right? Somebody said to me, another great piece of, this is a musician, like a real musician, who said to me, Rich, when people are listening to your music, what they most want is they want to let go. And the way you can help them let go is by letting go yourself. And, I love that piece of advice. And so I think that's part of what happens when I play in front of people. It's sort of like, dude, are you okay? I mean, what's going on here? But I kind of like letting go.
Thank you. Berkeley is very much about degrees of freedom to explore what gets you going. So here we go. Bare necessities, the simple bare necessities. Forget about your worries and your strife. It's the bare necessities, that's why a bear can rest at ease with just the bare necessities of life. Yeah, wherever I wander, wherever I roam, I'll never be far from this great bare home. The bees are buzzing in the trees, making honey just for me. When you look under the rocks and plants, take a glance at fancy ants, and then, hey, maybe try a few. The bare necessities of life will come to you. Yeah, well, the bare necessities, the simple bare necessities. Forget about your worries and your strife. Bare necessities, that's why a bear can rest at ease with just bare necessities of life. Wherever I wander, wherever I roam, I'll never be far from this great bare home. Yeah, the bees are buzzing in the trees, making honey just for me. When you look under the rocks and plants and take a glance at the fancy ants, and then, well, maybe try a few. Bare necessities of life will come to you. Yeah, bare necessities of life will come to you.
You lose yourself in the music. I love that. And thank you for the connections between kind of just being in front of an audience, whether that's students or donors or other education leaders. It sounds like that lights you up. Let's go a little further back, even than high school. When you think of yourself as a child, a young child, what seeds were planted around music or education or leadership?
Interesting. Well, I had two older brothers, so three boys, and a good chunk older, 8 and 7 years older than I was, right? So they got me into a lot of things too early. I'll just leave it at that. They it was sort of like, are you kidding me? Really? He's like 6. What are you doing? Anyway, so lots of good experiences though with my wonderful brothers, and they, we were very close and still are. So that was one piece of it. I think, I don't know that I would call that leadership necessarily, but you kind of see things in people that you deeply respect, both positive things. And then as you get older, it's sort of like that characteristic of my brother, that's not for me. That I'm not going, right? So you start to discriminate the things that you really appreciate in their leadership. I'll give you just one example. My oldest brother, his name is Lad. Lad, when he was in high school, he was a very good athlete himself, but at basketball games, I went to Los Altos High School, the public high school in the South Bay. And he used to, so again, I'm 8 years his junior, right? So he's in high school and I'm like 10 or whatever, and he's 17 or 18. And he's leading cheers by himself. So he wasn't like, he was more an athlete than a cheer guy. But they would call him out, and he would lead cheers of the whole stadium, the whole Los Altos side of the auditorium where the game was being played. It's just like, what kind of chutzpah does that take? How do you pull that off at 18? So he was quite an exemplar for me. It's sort of like, get out there, friend, get over your fear. There's like, there isn't really that much that's at risk here, if you're honest. It's just all psychological risk. And I got introduced to that, getting over that threshold at a pretty young age.
Well, it sounds like your older brother was quite comfortable in front of an audience too. So a little known fact that I found out about you is that you used to busk in Central Park in New York.
Yes.
For folks who don't know the term, busking is playing music in public for voluntary donations. How did you get there? And how did busking build out your character?
Wow. Well, that's a fun question. And so when I went to graduate, I really picked up the guitar in graduate school. I'll just, I didn't start when I was young. In graduate school, I went to get a PhD in economics. And like everybody, I was working hard. I was working so hard that it's sort of like, my friend, you are unbalanced. Your life is completely unbalanced. You need something to save yourself. And guitar and music is what I started doing. So it was pretty late in my life, right? I'm in my early 20s by then, mid 20s really. So it started late, but it became really important for me. It was sort of, again, it was like, look, I need a meditation. I need an anchor. I need a place where I can go to decompress and so forth. So pretty early on, it became that. And I started to realize that I loved it. Anyways, got out of graduate school. My first job was in New York. I was teaching at Columbia Business School. But while I was in graduate school, so I was at MIT, and I lived close to Cambridge Square, for those of you that know that area. Or Harvard Square rather. And there was a busker that played there. His name, he went under the name of Flathead. He's not a famous guy. I actually found some YouTube videos of him playing in Santa Monica and stuff. So I've looked him up since then. But the important thing is I used to sit and watch him play, and I saw the joy he got out of it. And I think that was like, there's a bunch of joy in music that I would love to sort of sense as much joy as Flathead felt when he was playing in Harvard Square. So, and I used to seek him out. I used to try and look at him. So anyways, that was my graduate school experience as I was getting into the guitar, and then back to Columbia. So now I'm in Columbia, and it's sort of like, do you have the yarbles? Do you have the confidence to go out in Central? Because he also used to play in Central Park. I saw him in Central Park a couple of times, right, in New York, not in Boston, Cambridge. And so I saw him playing in this place in Central Park, and I used to go listen to him then too, right? And at one point it was like, I should try that. I should try that. I should get over this psychological hump. I wasn't very good, but it's like, I'm going to do it, because the real risk to my career, to my life, was zero. But psychologically, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And so I went out there with a car battery, because that's the way he did it, hooked up to an amplifier, and I played about 15 tunes and went home. And that was an important psychological moment for me.
What did you learn about yourself?
Well, I learned that, I think even back then I was starting to think, look, there's some risky things in life. There's some things that can change your pathway, change your family's pathway. It's like, they're very real risks. There are other risks that are largely psychological. It's like, do you have the degrees of freedom to take advantage of life in the fullest sense? Because a lot of those psychologically risky things that aren't, practically risky are the things that you have to train yourself to get to the other side of. And so I think it was one of those cases where it's sort of like, I just changed myself. I didn't change anybody else, but I just changed myself by getting over that. And I think that gave me a lot of confidence. Look, I wasn't that good. For somebody who says, I don't want to be mediocre at anything, it's like, well, then you're going to be closed off to a bunch of stuff. It's sort of like, you have to put yourself out there and not be that good. You have to have people tell you, you're not that good. And you have to say, I agree. And why don't you listen to me in 5 years? I mean, you kind of have to be able to handle that. And it's not easy to handle.
Let's take a moment to reflect on this question. What's something you're not that good at yet that brings you joy? And how can you put yourself out there? Outside of hosting this podcast, I partner with leaders in the workplace to turn professional challenges into leadership successes and career progression. I love working with executive leaders, aspiring C-suite professionals, and of course, ampersands. If any of this sounds interesting to you, reach out to me at jessicawan.com. That's JESSICAWAN.com. Now, back to the show. You approach life and leadership in such an authentic and holistic way. I've heard people call you the rock star dean, at least when I was at Haas, that's what we called you. They're probably going to call you the rock star chancellor. Some business leaders, as they kind of rise up, they might feel compelled to actually put the guitar away or separate that part of life or kind of hide it. But you have actually leaned in. What helps you show up as your full self?
Oh, it's an important question, I think, for all of us, whether we're talking about our work or our family or whatever it is, kind of that finding those things that are a little bit truer about ourselves and trying to live in ways consistent with them. I mean, we all face things where it's sort of like, no, I can't let all of it hang out right now. I mean, people expect certain things, like when I'm a chancellor. I'll give you an example just from the last week. So my announcement, as you said, was about 2 weeks ago, right? And I start formally on July 1, right? So two months away about, right? Well, there was an event that I was already signed up to be part of. And so I went to the event and there were donors in the room and so forth. It wasn't a super formal event. And I was dressed the way I normally do in the office. I mean, you're seeing me here. I realize this is a podcast, but I've got a tie on and a collared shirt and a coat and stuff and a suit, basically. But anyways, I showed up dressed the way I've been dressing the last few years on campus. I'm not teaching much these days. I had a coat on, but, khakis and kind of like tennis shoes. Well, somebody said after the fact, it's like, what? Basically, you're underdressed. But it was constructive feedback. But the idea was, I thought I started on July 1. In people's minds, it's like, you're the chancellor designate, man. That's what everybody's seeing when you're up there. Okay. Don't think, oh, you're in your old position. That's not what they're seeing. And it was like, oh, that's such good feedback. That's just, I get it. I've got to adjust now, not on July 1. And you could look at that and say, well, that's a lack of authenticity. You should just dress the way you want to dress. But it's sort of like, no, I'm serving an institution. This isn't about me. How do I advance Berkeley's mission as much as possible? And I get a lot of satisfaction from that. And dressing up a little bit more, starting now, is part of how I serve the institution. I get that.
Yeah, thanks so much for that example. And yes, I think people are already thinking of you as the chancellor, and people are very excited.
Thank you.
So there's a lot to look forward to. One of the legacies that you left Haas are the 4 defining principles. Is there a principle that you're leaning into now as you start as chancellor?
I would say absolutely, in part because those 4 principles that we laid down for and with Haas, this is a team effort. It wasn't just me. They were so representative of Berkeley, of the mothership. I mean, nobody hears those 4 things and say, oh, that's Haas, that's not Berkeley. It's sort of like, if anything, it's like, well, that's Berkeley, and you sort of borrow them, and leverage them. It's like, I think that's closer to the truth, just being honest, right? So one of them is question the status quo. Right? And I think of it as a mindset. There's got to be a better way to do this. Now, there are a lot of unobjectionable values that somebody could say, I don't want to mention any, I don't want to disrespect anybody, but here's an important value. It's like, yeah, everybody says that. That's an important thing. Right? But so I shouldn't mention any other universities either, but think of a really prominent private university, whichever one, just very prominent. And then imagine I'm the president of that private university. And I'm on this podcast saying, this private university, we're all about questioning the status quo. I doubt that's going to happen. Now, there are lots of faculty and students, and there are lots of people questioning the status quo at elite private universities. There's no question about that, right? But they're never going to say that because most of those institutions are really not viewed that way. And Berkeley is. When people say, oh, Berkeley, question the status quo, it's sort of like, yeah, of course. What else have you got? Right? It's sort of like, it's so part of Berkeley's DNA. So anyways, that's one of the ones that I often start with because it's really quite separating from other universities. And it's just completely aligned with where Berkeley comes from. And I just want to underscore one piece of this too. I often, when I talk about question the status quo, I will follow it with the phrase, and I think I just did, hey, that mindset of there's got to be a better way to do this. And part of why I do that is because, there are a lot of smart people who don't have as a first thought, there's got to be a better way to do this. So it's not one-to-one with intelligence. It's a different mindset. It's a different way of life. I love working with and being around people who actually have that thought pretty naturally. I'll bet there's a better way to do this. I love that kind of person. I want to attract that kind of person to Berkeley. I want Berkeley to be about that. It lines up with questioning the status quo. So anyways, that's one of the 4. I'm not saying it's by far the most important, but it kind of tells the story of how different it is and also how valuable it is in the world as it is today.
Absolutely. And it makes me just feel very excited for what's to come, right? If there's got to be a better way, then we can find it, put it into place. How exciting that is. A little birdie told me that you start every morning with some time on the guitar. You are obviously a very busy person with a big job and a family, so this really takes commitment. What fuels you to start your mornings on music?
Well, coffee. I like a lot of people. The first thing I do is coffee and feed the dog if I'm the first one up. But anyways, more seriously, we have a separated garage at our home in Berkeley, and so people don't have to listen to me. Really, I think some sound seeps out, but not a lot. And sometimes, look, if I don't have that much time, right? Some of us, the mornings where it's like, all right, I don't have that much time, but it's sort of like, I'm going to play 3 tunes. And I'm going to play them as pure as I can. And I'm going to put it down. And there's a treadmill in our garage, and I might get 5 or 10 minutes on the treadmill, like just walking fast. I don't even run, but it's sort of like, I like routines that I think keep me sane, keep me anchored, keep me healthy. So if I'm really tight, I will go into the garage and I'll play like 3 songs. I mentioned Rolling Stones. If you said, what are your go-to tunes? It's like Sympathy for the Devil. I bounce around. It's like I'm dancing. I stand, by the way. I'm standing and I'm like bouncing around. I really like I've got kind of a rhythmic, I like to think a rhythmic style of playing. So anyways, so I might play like 3 songs and get on the treadmill for 5 minutes, like fast walking. And then I'm out of there in like literally 10 minutes. Normally it's more than that, but, it's just one of those things where it's kind of like, I really have to do that. I'll share something I don't share with everybody. Okay. Here it is on the podcast. Oh my God. Are you sure you want to share that? Anyways, all of us from time to time have some trouble sleeping, right? I have no trouble getting to sleep. I never have, but sometimes I'll wake up after 5 hours of sleep and it's 2:30 in the morning. And it's sort of like, all right, I don't want to sit here and just stew on this stuff. I've got something in my brain. It's got it's cycling, and I will go into the garage at 2:30. and without the light on, and I will play 2 or 3 or 4 tunes, and then I will feel tired and I will go back to sleep. So it's kind of, sometimes that morning is like really early, and it just helps me recenter and usually I fall back asleep immediately after that.
Wow, that is amazing. I'm going to steal that. I don't have the detached garage though, so I don't know if a opera singer at 2 a.m. is going to be welcome by my partner and kid.
Yeah.
It sounds like music provides kind of meditative qualities as well as routine. And I'm curious how you've built this routine into your days, how long that took, how long you've been starting your mornings that way. What advice would you give to somebody who actually wants to add some music or painting or movement into their life, and they're kind of trying to do it, but it's a little bit hard?
Yeah, well, I think routines, I mean, my wife Jen would say the same thing. Routines, they work for me. Habits, routines, whatever word we're going to use, I think they do work for me, and they don't work as well for everybody. But here's what I would say. I think part of what makes the habit stick, at least for me, but I think for a lot of people, is when most days, like I'll use a story to communicate this. I will come in after I've played and my kids are up, or if they're up, or Jen is invariably up, my wife, and I'll say, "Oh, I had a breakthrough today." And then it's sort of like a break. It's like, yeah, I this one little pull off noise. It's like, that's a breakthrough. It's just sort of like, dude, that's not a breakthrough. But every day it's sort of like, I figured something out today. I just like a little different way of making a sound, a little different rhythm, a little different way of playing a song I've played 1,000,000 times. Sweet Baby James. I played Sweet Baby James this morning differently than I'd ever played it before. I've played it like 1,000,000,000 times. But it's those things where it's like, that was different. That was fun. And usually it's with some intentionality. It's sort of like I was mentioning earlier. It's like when you are singing, you are singing. You're not just kind of playing the guitar and singing and they happen to be happening at the same time. You have to be more intentional about that. So anyways, giving yourself the psychological dopamine shots of that 20 minutes or whatever this morning, I got this positive delta, and giving yourself credit for that will keep you going.
You're essentially programming in quick little wins for yourself in the morning. That's fantastic. So I'm a partner of a Cal professor myself, which I just count myself so blessed to meet so many young people, a lot of freshmen this year, who really identify as ampersands. I know some EECS majors who are incredible musicians. I know some K-pop dancers who are also scientists. Cal is just full of them. What advice do you have for multi-passionate students as they go out into the adult world?
Wow, that's a big and wonderful question. This one person's voice, sometimes it's kind of like, don't listen to me. It's like, I'll give it anyway. One story that I promise I'll answer your question, but I remember I was an assistant professor just out of graduate school. I was at Columbia, and somebody was a student, an MBA was asking us, another finance faculty member was asking us, should I get a PhD and become an academic? And I'm going, oh, I love this. It's great. You should do it. And my colleague, the other faculty member, said, Rich, we won the lottery. I mean, there are a lot of people that get PhDs that don't end up where we are. I mean, you're giving advice based on your experience, but your experience is pretty special. I mean, this person's asking you for life advice. You need to be a little bit more balanced in the way you think about it. It was just great advice because it's okay. So I'm going to come back to my own, perspective on this, but, for most of those Ampersand students, right, I think they already realize that this is a pretty fundamental part of who they are. And look, especially coming out of school, I'm thinking, am I going into a big job? It's a big job. Is it challenges? There are going to be a lot of challenges. But psychologically, it's sort of like, I've been a dean. Look, there's a bunch of stuff I'm going to get hit with that is going to surprise me. But it's sort of like, I've got a lot of decades of tools I've built up, right? My kids get out of college and go into their first job. It's sort of like, that's hard. You don't know what you're capable of at that age. You haven't developed a whole bouquet of identities that you can use when you need to use them and adjust, right? And so in many ways, I view that, as strange as this sounds, that's a really hard transition going into that life, not quite knowing who you are or what your skill set is. All of that is to say that I think, the ampersand part, the arts, the dance, the movement, whatever form it takes, it's sort of like, if that's speaking to you, you got to keep letting it speak. And if you don't have any room to be doing it in the short run, don't let it die or atrophy. You just got to know it's there and come back to it as soon as you have any slack.
Oh, thank you. Through these interviews, we're co-creating the Ampersand Manifesto, which are principles for leading a multi-passionate life. What do you think should be included in the manifesto?
Wow. Well, here's one that I say to myself all the time, and it relates to something I mentioned before. The idea is it's more important to play. As a musician, you could substitute any verb or art in here, but it's more important to play than to play well. I need to give myself room to get better. Nobody starts great. Nobody, right? You have to have talent and like 10,000 hours to get to great, right? So it's sort of like, and so that phrase is like, give yourself room to not be excellent, basically, right? That's kind of, but whether that's the right phrasing, more important to play than to play well. So that one is way up there. And then the second one, it was kind of goes back to that advice. We say, what's some of the best musical advice, for example, you've ever had? Well, I've mentioned a couple of them. And one was listen to yourself, listen while you're playing, listen, record it and listen to other people. Like I saw the movie, The Greatest Night in Pop, the other day. I don't know have you seen this movie? Mm-mm. Okay. So it's all about the making of We Are the World. Oh. And it's all these, everybody, I won't even go through the list. It's like 50 of the most famous musicians were in the same room at A&M studio back in the 80s, whenever it was, 83, 84. And it was all footage of them interacting with one another. And so it was all superstars. They put a sign on the door, check your ego at the door. These were super duper stars, right? And then you're listening to the voices and how they sang and how different they were and the tonal quality of their voice. And it's sort of like, you can sing, and then you can also, it's sort of like, I need to be more intentional in finding my voice and listening to the style of all these people in the same room. So that was like a week ago. But again, it's sort of like listening. It's sort of like, wow, I just learned something from that person. So kind of coaxing out the lessons in a movie like that or an experience like that for your own style and playing.
Well, Rich, it has been incredible and really fun talking with you. Folks, you can learn more about Rich at ine.berkeley.edu or on his Haas faculty page, and we'll link to these in the show notes. If you liked this show, hit like, subscribe, and share with your friends and fellow ampersands. And if you're enjoying our show, please consider leaving a rating or a short review so that more people can find out about the show. I had a chance to listen back on my interview with Rich, and I wanted to share a few key takeaways. One theme that connects a lot of Rich's stories is the keen observation and listening that he puts into place, whether it's in an academic or artistic setting. I loved hearing about his formative years as a younger brother, as a musician playing in Central Park, and as a student studying Willie Nelson in his live performance. Rich clearly puts a lot of effort into active listening, and he's always learning. I think this will serve him really, really well as Chancellor. 2, there's an element of fearlessness that Rich both embodies himself and encourages for others, and it's really inspiring. I'm thinking about what he said around fear. Is it real fear of some sort of danger, or more of a psychological fear, which might really be low risk. I think a lot of us have fears about putting ourselves out there, and that ends up holding us back. But what if that wasn't the case? 3. Find what makes you feel most alive. Talking to Rich, you can feel the energy that he feels when he's teaching, speaking in front of a crowd, or letting go and getting lost in the music that he loves. And the more that he leans in, the more we lean in, the more he's able to serve his community. And that's real leadership.
Whenever the end of my chancellorship is, what if I went back and got a master's degree in music? It's like, wow, that would be radical. But it's like, no, I want to do this hard for 5 or 6 or 7 hours a day and see what the heck happens. It's like, I don't know if I'm going to do that. But I love the fact that idea is out there, right? And so part of it is, what's kind of the next level of commitment look like, and what could I entertain it anytime soon? That's part of, I think, keeping the dream alive.